People, episode 13, recorded 8th of the 11th, 81, duration 1 by 30 minutes, to be advised. Replay.
Hello and welcome again to the Valley's People. Today we're going to meet a Hunter Valley youthful author, in fact a man now that's receiving Australian and world acclaim, and a very exciting new personality on the scene. Also the chief executive of an enterprise which is so very much part of the Hunter Valley that if we're not very careful we sort of take it for granted. I'd like to learn a little bit more about it with you today. Thanks for joining us, and I'll be back in just a moment for today's two guests. Our first guest today in the Valley's People is a youthful author. In fact, he wrote this book, Jack Rivers and Me, when 18. Not only did he write it at 18, but he won a $10,000 literary prize, the Australian Vogel Prize, for the work of Jack Rivers and Me. And that's Newcastle author Paul Radley. Welcome to the Valley's People, Paul. That's quite an age to be to winning prizes, literary prizes, at 18. We're very proud of you, Paul. In fact, I guess Australia is generally. But the image that most of us would have of a writer is someone who, I guess, is ducks of the school in English and is fantastic at composition and sits at home sweltering over a hot typewriter and shuts himself off from the rest of the world. But that doesn't seem to be anywhere near your life at all.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
No, I get none out of 10 for that.
None. Nothing at
Well,
all.
how was it? How did it begin?
Just before I left school, just after I left school, I just sort of got interested in writing and went around pubs, talking to old people. And
All right. So your interest after you left school? You had no interest in composition in English?
No, nothing at
all. A bit of a bash, was it? Yeah.
Just normal school life sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just hated school.
Really? You just wanted to start writing. But you didn't realise that at the start, did you? No. Because you went into an ordinary job.
Just I was working at David Jones for a while and part-time something, you know, just playing sport.
Yeah, well, so the flashes of inspiration did come over wrapping a parcel or what?
I was just talking to relatives, old relatives, you know, about when they were young and that. And I just sort of got it from there, you know, taping people in pubs. You know.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the word pub there, and the scene of the book, Jack Rivers and Me, is really a town, Boomeroo, and you don't seem to have given the pub ordinary status. You've rather regarded it as, you know, the holy local or something.
Yeah, well, that's where all the old people live, you know, and they hang around there, all the mates, talking, drinking, and getting pissed, you know. Yeah,
so you're thinking in terms of the Hunter Valley. What period are we in? What year?
Around about early 50s or something.
Why? Does it just seem like a light years away for you? Or?
Yeah, well, when you get to talk to these old guys, you know, they're talking about when they were young and that, sort of really interested in it, you know, and when they were young, you know, I was just...
Yeah, well, you've got the characters in this book. You've got, firstly, Peanuts is the typical young fellow, isn't he, the Hunter Valley? What, 8, 9 or 10, somewhere there?
Oh, 5, 6, you know.
Oh, really?
And just sort of getting how young kids are when they start picking things up, you know.
Yeah. And then you've got Connie, who's everybody's elder sister.
She's
not very nice, though, is she?
No, Peanut has got a imaginary friend, Jack Rivers, you know, and he can just about do anything, but Connie, that's Peanut's sister, she's flesh and bloody there, you know, she just gets around anything. And
well, she's older and crankier too, isn't she? Yeah. And then there seems to be Mum. Mum is is typical nice lady, really, isn't she? And everybody's idea. She's, in fact, holding the family together because Dad seems to want to take all his troubles down to the holy local.
Well, the father's American, I sort of based that on, I had a few relatives that are American and they came over to stay with us. You know, I had a load of Americanisms I wanted to put in there, you know, and just assumed a good chance to put them in there.
Well, when you were 18, did this strike you that the sweet young boy and a very bitchy type elder sister and a dad that drank at the pub rather than take any problems home at all, and mum trying to hold all this together, did this strike you as the typical family in the Hunter Valley?
No, not really a typical family. It's just, well, Peanut, I wanted to base him on a sort of inferior to all other little kids, you know, sort of.
Yeah.
And then
harder done by them mostly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Connie, I wanted to make her really rotten, you know, sort of.
You did that, all right.
She was, but she was. Towards the end of the book, you see that she was really nice, you know. She did care about her brother and everything, but it was just when she was sort of going to school and that, and she wasn't.
Yeah.
It's mostly Peanut wants to take his young imaginary friend to school with him. And Connie goes to the same school and she's got pretty good mates over there, and she doesn't want to be humiliated by Peanut with his imaginary friend there, you know. She tries to get rid of Peanut and his imaginary friend.
Yeah, well, it's a sort of brother and sister tiff, really, isn't it, there? It goes on for a long, long while. I'm in a slightly difficult position, Paul, I guess, and I hope you realise it. It's not a book that you could just turn around and recommend to everybody that they should go out and buy, much as I'd like to see you collect the royalties, because, I mean, there are some terms in there and there are scenario in there which really is foreign to a lot of homes and a lot of families. I mean, they just don't throw around four-letter words in this particular family. But as far as you were concerned, at the same time, this was typical of many places that you've seen and company that you've been with.
Well, it's just about life, really. You know, you can't sort of go into a pub and say, "Oh, golly gee," you know. You don't hear that in the pub, you know. You've got to throw in a few words, you know.
That's right. So it's real life.
Yeah, it's real life. You can't.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the the modern terms that you know, but you also brought back a lot of old terms that you would have thought had died out a little bit before you'd heard them.
Yeah, well,
how did you research that?
When I was wasn't 18, you know, and pretty hard to get in clubs and that. I go around to a few old pubs in the Hunter Valley, you know, and with a duffel bag and put my tape recorder inside the bag and put it on the counter, and just ask these old guys, you know, what they did when they were young and that.
Over a couple of beers?
Over a couple of beers, a few beers, you know.
Yes, right.
And you'd play that back and find out all these old anachronisms that were there, and you know, you'd be surprised all the words that you'd never heard of before, you know. And
there's one in your book I hadn't heard of for ages. I'll spifflicate you. The word spifflicate. No, I hadn't used that for a long while.
Oh, there's a few going around, you know.
And Blind Freddy?
Blind Freddy, yeah. Oh,
you picked all those up from the bar with the tape recorder in the bag?
Yeah, I've got older relatives that sort of now and again I'll just say, oh, Blind Freddy will give quids or something, you know, to see that. Or Horseman will give quids or something, you know.
How do you get on now, Paul, when you go, if you go back to those same pubs and you've got same drinking buddies who realise that unknowingly and unwittingly they've contributed some expressions and phrases to your book? Oh,
they always sort of have a jag around, sort of say, oh, watch out, he's got a tape recorder under the table or something.
His second novel. It seems, though, that you had a sort of, fairly typical upbringing, 2 brothers and 2 sisters and normal kind of family. How did they react to the fact that you were writing a book? Did you take them into your confidence at some stage of it or not?
I didn't really let them know because I was used to be in a room or something, and Mum would come in through the door and I'd be sort of just talking into a tape, and as soon as she'd come in I'd just sort of stop, you know, just sort of real conscious of it. I didn't really let on that I was writing a book. I just didn't really think it was just doing it for hobby sort of thing. So when I was in collecting my prize down in Sydney, one of the papers rang up our house and my brother was there, and he remembered it when I was telling Mum, just sort of joking, you go into the beach, I said, I'm writing a book, and she sort of said, oh, sure, you know, had a little giggle about it, you know, and then he remembered that and they said, oh, what did the family think, you know, and he didn't think of anything to say, he just said, oh, told them, you know, he remembers that, and the headlines on the paper the next morning was, family was amused, you know, so it didn't go over too well.
No, indeed, no. Your schooling was Morris Brothers, Boyside, Hamilton, and they told me there that your basic interest wasn't so much in writing books, but playing rugby league. Just
playing league or union, Australian rules or something, you know.
Yeah, and a few stitches in the eye to prove it.
Yeah.
That's over what, your left eye?
Yeah, left eye, that's just from lead this year.
Yeah. Yes, well, you're still living a dangerous life, apart from being a writer. And Paul, the other thing about your rewards, I guess there's you know, there's internal joy in getting a literary prize to start with of $10,000, but that seems to have been reinforced by the fact that you also got $17,000 as a grant, arts grant, literary grant, to carry on your work. Now, I guess you know, you realise that's taxpayers' money, so it's a matter of sort of knuckling down. How are you going to discipline yourself now? Are you going to keen to keep on writing?
Oh, I'll keep on writing. I'll have to, you know, because at the end of the year, I want some sort of proof that I've done something, you know.
Yes.
So I've got to hand something in. So, like it was before, it was just a hobby, you know, sort of doing it when I felt like it. But I'll have to do something every day, sort of thing. But
yes,
not like 8 hours a day or something, you know. Probably get up in the morning early or something and do straight work or something, and then have the afternoon off or something. You know, you can't sort of just sit down and write full time. How
are you going to get the inspiration for your books if it's not through a tape recorder hidden on a bar? Have you got some other thoughts?
I've still got a lot of relatives around. You know, we went to a family reunion up in Port Macquarie, and there was about 50 Radleys there. You know, and I was talking to an old auntie, and she said that I said, "Geez, there's a lot of Radleys here today," and she said, "Oh, geez, Paul, I don't know, there was half of them never turned up, you know." So there must have been heaps more, so I'm going to talk around to these Radleys, you know. So.
Yes, so they'll be attacking you a little later on, identifying themselves as one of the characters in your future novels. It must have been very pleasing to have the Vogel judges make the comment about Jack Rivers and Me, that it was astonishing in its maturity. They must have been overwhelmed by the fact this was your first book of any magnitude. Did anyone pass on any helpful advice to you since winning that award?
Yeah, I've had the editor that did the book for me. I've been in constant touch with her, you know. She's helped me a lot in the editing of it. With the second book, I didn't have to do, I could cut it down myself, sort of cut the things out that I went on too much about, you know.
Yes.
And one of the judges has helped me a lot, you know. She said, gave me a good talk and told me, you know, a few things that could help me out, you know. So, oh yeah, there's been a fair bit of help coming in, you know.
Yes. You know, one of the things that always amazes me about this program, The Valley's People, are the people that you meet that are, you know, becoming world famous from the Hunter Valley. And Paul, we congratulate you. It's not everybody's a chance, an opportunity in life to have a novel that goes to the best-selling lists when you're 18, and now in your early 20s you can look back on that, and we hope there are many more novels to come in your life. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us today in The Valley's People. We'll be meeting our second guest in just a moment. Second guest today is the General Manager of the Hunter Valley Cooperative Dairy Limited, better known as Oak, I think, and that's Mr. Chris O'Brien. Welcome to the Valley's People, Chris.
Thank you, Ron.
In fact, it's very difficult to remember calling someone O'Brien with the scars so long as being General Manager of Oak. Many, many years.
Well, the Scars were General Manager right from 1903, the inception of the company, right through until 1977, when Mr. Tom Scar, the last of the Scar brothers, or Scar boys as they were known, retired from the industry, and I was fortunate enough to secure the position of General Manager at that stage.
Yes, because your personal association with Oak goes back many years too, doesn't it?
Well, I've been employed by the company for 31 years, and prior to that I was born and reared on a dairy farm, so I've been connected with the milk industry all my life.
Yes, Oak fits most of our lives in the Hunter Valley to such a degree that we probably don't stop and think just how far-reaching are the products of Oak. Where do you see Oak fitting into the valley, Chris?
Well, I think the Oak products and the Oak Company, or the Hunter Valley Dairy Company, which we should use, I'm not quite sure. I think it's more known as Oak than anything else.
Yes.
I think it reaches all people within the valley. Our products are distributed widely right throughout the valley, but the company itself has had a big bearing on the life and the lifestyle of the valley. I think the company in the early times, particularly in the times up before we got the industrial boom on us over the last few years, I think the company probably was one of the central themes or the area around which a lot of the activity of the people of the valley and particularly the small towns, it's what it revolved around. And I think the company tried to give a lead in a lot of ways in social problems and relating to the dairy farmer as to his lot. I think it did a lot in that, and we hope it continues to do so.
Who were these people that really began it all in years gone by?
They were a marvellous bunch of people, really. It goes back to the late 1900s and the early late 1890s and the early 1900s. That following the failure of the wheat, which was grown extensively for a few years in the Lower Hunter area, that people turned to dairying, and there was a few small proprietary butter factories starting up in the various places around. There was one at Duckenfield, there was one out at Cessnock, and these were taking the produce of the farmer and converting it into butter and selling it on the Sydney market. Mm. There was one man in particular, William Brown, who was the proprietor of the Raymond Terrace Examiner at that time. He had this idea of a cooperative company.
And not a dairy farmer?
Not a dairy farmer.
Isn't that interesting?
No,
yeah.
It is interesting. And he talked to a lot of the people that he knew, of course, in the area, and he got together about half a dozen people, and he enthused them with the idea of the cooperative company looking after the farmer's interests. And these people pledged themselves jointly and severally to the formation of that company, so that if the company had failed, they were liable personally for the debts. The company commenced operations in 1903 at Raymond Terrace, and from there it has gone from strength to strength. And we owe a tremendous debt to these early people that took the risk, I suppose. It was a tremendous risk that they took. They took the risk and started the company based on the total concept of a cooperative company.
Could you imagine them having the vision of where Oak is today, Chris?
Well, I think when you examine the people concerned, knowing what they did, when we look at it from our times back to them, I think we can understand the vision that they had, but I don't think anyone at that time would have really had any, apart from themselves, would have had any real idea of what the company was going to grow into.
Yes, because the life of a dairy farmer, I guess, was a fairly restrictive one then, wasn't it?
It was very restrictive. Communications weren't what they are today. Transport certainly wasn't what it is.
You had to get your milk from the river and all places, yeah?
All milk pretty well in the early times was collected by launch and conveyed to a central point, and then conveyed by wagon to the factory, because the factory at Raymond Terrace was situated about a kilometre away from the river.
Mm. And how did they really centre Oak at Hexham? Was that adjacent to the river?
As the company grew, they realised they needed to expand, and I think this is where their foresight really came to the front, was that they could see that transport was a big factor. We needed transport to get the product in, not only from the farms on the rivers, but from the farms that were away from the rivers. Mm. And also they needed an outlet to be able to get the produce to the Sydney market.
Yes.
So the situation at Hexham was an ideal point where it was very close to the river and it had the rail line directly behind it.
Yes. Then you had that great controversy, didn't you, which sort of rocked the dairy farmers nationwide about whether you were going to pick up milk in cans or whether you were going to send a huge tanker truck to their property.
Well, it was...
You lived through that?
It was a rather interesting period because the results proved it to be a correct decision.
Just the major differences, Chris, so we understand.
Well, prior to the bulk collection, all milk was milked into, placed in 10-gallon cans.
Right.
Then had to be transported by the farmer, in some cases a mile or 2 miles out to the road, to be picked up by a truck, which came along and picked the milk up from the farmer's milk stand, as many people would know.
You're still there,
and
most
then,
farms.
Yes, and taken into the factory. This meant that the farmer, twice a day, had to have his milk in these cans at the roadside at an appointed time. But with the advent of bulk collection, what it means is that the farmer has a refrigerated bulk tank in his dairy. The milk is placed directly into that refrigerated tank and chilled down to about 35 degrees Fahrenheit, a few degrees above freezing point, immediately after milking. And then the tanker calls along every second day and picks that milk up.
Sounds fairly simple now, but you had an awful lot of selling to do at the time.
We had a tremendous amount of selling to do at the time because there were some farmers, and some were very vocal about it, that the cost involved was, they thought, was going to be tremendous. The cost of the VAT and the cost of providing suitable road to allow the tanker to travel from the main road into the farms. Now, we're glad to say that we overcame all those problems, and once we got a few people starting on it, that more could see the advantage of it. It took away a lot of the drudgery from the farmer, and particularly from the farmer's wife, I think, because it was her job in many cases to do the washing up of all these milk cans that used to arrive back from the factory twice a day, and in some cases there could be 20 or 30 milk cans that would turn.
Yes.
They had to be hand washed, and in many cases it was the farmer's wife who had this job to do.
Yes, I guess on reflection, people will be wondering what all the shouting was about now, and seen in the modern context.
Seen in the modern context, I'd say yes. Well, we're glad to say that some of our greatest opponents in the bulk milk controversy, it didn't take them too long to realise that they were wrong, and there were some of those became our greatest advocates for it in the latter stages, and they were responsible in a lot of cases for convincing other people to finally put the VATs in, so that now we have total bulk collection we have had for the last number of years. Yeah,
it struck me, being a cooperative like that, there was always a fair degree of heart went into Oak. I remember the 55 floods and other floods where I remember seeing, well, you could hardly see the Oak at Hexham at those days, could you?
It was nearly underwater. It was...
you seemed to get back into production very quickly.
Well, the flood came up on the Friday night, for those that remember anything about it, and I remember it quite vividly because I was concerned with it, not at the factory itself, but at Raymond Terrace. The flood came up on the Friday night and rose very, very rapidly. And within a few hours, the plant at Hexham was about 10 feet underwater, completely underwater. The machinery and the buildings were the best part of it being underwater. And there was no way at all, because nothing moved in the total area pretty well between Maitland and Raymond Terrace. The work that was done by the people at the factory, it's tremendous in flood times, and I'd have to give the employees credit for what they do, because it's the old saying that when the chips are down, that they all hop in and do their job.
There are a lot of people prepared to give you a fair bit of credit around Raymond Terrace in that flood too, I hear. Your local knowledge was one of those things that...
Well, I was fortunate, I think, on that, in that flood, very fortunate, because it's one of the things which I feel very proud of during my life, and it's a thing I never forget. When I got out of bed and living in Raymond Terrace in the morning and found what the depth of water was, to see the Raymond Terrace showground with the water nearly up to the crossbars of the football goalpost.
Can't believe it, can you?
I couldn't believe it, and having lived on Millers Forest all my life, I immediately, of course, knew what the state would be over there, and I knew what the depth of water that was in Raymond Terrace there, that there'd be houses completely underwater in Millers Forest. So I rushed down to the river, because I knew that that's where any activity would be going on, and I was met there by Jim Scott, and many people would remember Jim Scott, of course, Councillor Jim Scott. Well, Jim grabbed me by the arm as soon as he saw me, and he said, "Thank God you're here." He said, "You know the Millers Forest area." He said, "Hop in that boat," he said, "and get out over and see what you can do for those people." So we went across, went out in the first boat, and we passed many people, of course, that were on the roof of a house, and anyone that was sitting on the roof of a house, we were quite prepared that they were quite safe. We weren't worried about those. We were out to get those who were really in trouble. And I knew of a couple of instances where the people would be in trouble. One was a woman that was crippled with arthritis, and another one was a lady whom I knew would be on her own. And we must remember that the lights, all electricity, went out about midnight when the water started to rise. We went to this person's house. It was Mrs. Hughes. We drove the boat straight in on the veranda. I jumped out into about, I suppose 3.5, 4 feet of water.
Cold morning, I seem to recall.
I don't think I've ever felt anything so cold as that flood water. I called out for Mrs. Hughes and never got an answer. Called out again and heard a feeble voice, pushed open the kitchen door and walked in, and a sight struck me that I don't think I'll ever forget. There's about 4 feet of water in the kitchen, and here was Mrs. Hughes sitting on a chair on top of the refrigerator, and she'd sat there through the night in darkness. How she got up there I don't know, but she did, and she was very, very pleased to see us.
I'll bet she was.
We got her into the boat and we got her back to Raymond Terrace. There's other instances like that.
Yeah, but I think that's the spirit of the valley, Chris.
That is the total spirit of the valley.
And it's a sort of self-help community, and I think it always will be. And of course, the part that Oak is playing is part of it all. We thank you very much for being with us today. And I guess when we look at Oak products now, it represents a little more than a milkshake.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Chris O'Brien, General Manager of the Oak Dairy Cooperative Limited. I'll be back in just a moment. Two sides of the Hunter Valley today. Youthful author Paul Radley, literary prize winner and for his novel Jack Rivers and Me, written at age of 18. And also Mr. Chris O'Brien, General Manager of what we know as Oak, so much a vital link to most people in the Hunter Valley. I hope you can join us again for our next show when we'll meet two more people from this valley of ours. Goodbye for now.